If you are new to Blender and you want to learn Blender in 2025 as efficiently as possible, this is a fantastic video for you, so stick around. We're gonna talk about Blender versions, we're gonna talk about installing Blender and basic tools in Blender, so you're gonna learn the whole framework for going forward, okay? It's really easy and it's fun. Let's get started. So point number one, you need to download Blender and install it, right? So you wanna go to blender.org/download and you want to get the latest LTS version, which is a release version of Blender. In your case, on our case right now in the video, it's going to be 4.5.1. Now, does this matter? No, it doesn't, okay? I have 7 Blender versions installed on my PC. I got 3.6, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, and 5.0. And you may think, well, hang on a second, 5.0, it's not in here. Like, am I living in a future? Well, kind of, because you can get an experimental version, which is the latest one. You see, Blender releases versions every day, okay? I'm not joking, I'm serious. Look at this. Every day, they drop a version, okay? Sometimes twice a day or 3 times a day, okay? That's how often experimental stuff is being updated. So technically, you could download Blender a few times a day if you want to stay really current. It's nonsense. You don't need to do this. What you want to do is you want to get the latest version, right, install on your PC and simply move forward. You need to start learning, Blender on one version and then you can expand. But what I want to tell you is really important. It's going to give you a broader idea and understanding of how it all works. When the Blender 2.8 was released 6 years ago, the changes between Blender versions are not that significant, okay? So you can very easily, work in Blender 4.1, 4.2, 4.0, 3.6, whatever, and follow new content. And that's actually what a lot of our students are doing because they found Blender version they really like and they stick to it, okay? And it's really important to understand. And you can run multiple versions of Blender on your PC. Even better, you can run 2 or 3 windows open of the same version of Blender. So you can open different files, blend files, in the same version of Blender at the same time. Which is really, very flexible. So you can move between versions and it's great. Now you're probably asking the question, why would anyone want to do that, right? Well, look, Blender is like Bethesda games, okay? It's great, but vanilla Blender is kind of meh, all right? So you want to enhance it with add-ons. And this is what's fantastic about Blender because it allows you to do that. So we have thousands of add-ons out there and you're going to find add-ons you want to really work with. I have like 5 or 6 core add-ons I work with all the time. And honestly, if my add-ons aren't updated or crashing new Blender, I will not work in that version. For example, 4.5 had a lot of issues and I stopped working in 4.5. I moved back to 4.4 and 4.3 because they were more stable. So what you want to do moving forward, and that's a pro tip for you, for the future, once you download Blender 4.5 or 4.6 or whatever, and you're going to find add-ons that you like, store them in a folder. You want to store the add-ons in a folder for the future use. So when in the future you want to work in that specific version of Blender, you will have these specific add-ons working with that specific version. Because let me tell you, if you try to install add-ons from 4.5 and try to install them in 3.6, it will not work. And vice versa, if you want to install add-ons that work with Blender 3.6 and 4.5, it will not work either because of coding changes, okay? So it's your responsibility to store these add-ons somewhere on your disk on a cloud, and you can even store them together with the LTS file version. So if you download this file, store them together in a folder with add-ons so you can install them on a different computer or, whatever, right? So that's how I would recommend working, and that's how I would recommend thinking about Blender, all right? So if you have Blender 4.5 and you want to follow content created in 3.6, it's absolutely no problem as long as the changes are addressed in that content. For example, our course for beginners, the Hard Surface Accelerator, which by the way, if you're really into Blender and you're a beginner or even intermediate, you should definitely get because it's fantastic. It's a very well structured curriculum packed with information that you really need to know. The whole workflow is explained. It's way beyond, you know, what I can pack into this video, way beyond, right? We even explain the principles of design, which are going to help you how to become a better artist. But what I'm trying to say is that in that course, we actually address minor changes that happen between Blender, you know, 3.6 or whatever, and current version, so you can watch that video and, oh, you know, kind of like, okay, so that's what changed, fine, no problem. And if you're going to know what changed and in which version something was recorded, and you're gonna be aware of these things, it's super easy to follow anything made in Blender going all the way back 6 years, okay? That's how easy it is, right? So don't get hung up on a version, don't think about it, use whatever version you want, and you can really easily adjust your you know, whatever you're doing to the content you're watching, okay? So even if you're watching a video from like 4 or 5 years ago, you're completely fine, okay? It's no problems. Don't worry about it. So now, if you want to get other versions of Blender, you can go here to experimental, right? Or you can go here to releases, and you can see there are, you know, LTS releases in here. One of the best and the most stable ones were 3.6 here, LTS, fantastic version, 4.0, amazing one, and 4.3 and 4.4 very stable as well. So, you know, actually 4.2 was good as well. So, you know, eventually when they're going to polish the versions, they're gonna fix all the bugs, like what now they're doing with 4.5. You know, these versions become really stable, and you wanna keep them, and you wanna keep add-ons for these versions. Really important, okay? And to show you even more, once you install Blender on your computer, so I'm going to launch 4.5, right? Now that's not the window you're going to see, so I'm going to show you, I'm going to reset Blender for you, right? If you go to this folder here, you're going to go to your PC, local drive C, users, your name, app data, roaming, Blender Foundation, Blender. You're going to be able to find all the config files for Blender, and this is really important. If you're going to install Blender and install some add-ons, and you're going to have problems with these add-ons, and you're going to reinstall Blender, it will not fix your problem. Even if you're going to go here to File and go to Defaults and load factory settings, even though it looks as it's reset, it's not. Okay, what you want to do is you want to go to this folder after you uninstall Blender, and you want to nuke that folder responsible for that specific version of Blender. So if I'm going to close this Blender and I'm going to nuke this folder, look what happens, right? My Blender will completely reset to defaults. Even the ratio of the screen got nuked back to 21:9, right? So what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to resize this window to fit it in here in the recording. That's basically a complete Blender reset. That's how you do it. You have to delete that folder with all the config informations for add-ons, Blender, etc. That's the only way to reset Blender completely, okay? This factory nonsense will do nothing, okay? So that's covered. Now, going back to installation, there's one more thing I need to tell you, okay? LTS versions, right? They're gonna come as a one file, and you install them on a disk. But if you're gonna be going with experimental, they come as a folder, as a zip. So you gotta download the zip, unzip it, go inside the folder, and launch Blender directly from that folder. So if you're gonna download something like, for example, 4.5, which is in here, you see this is an unzipped folder. I'm not installing it on a disk, it's actually just a folder, and you launch Blender from that folder directly, okay? That's how you launch it. So that's an experimental version of Blender, right? Any other Blender that's an LTS version, so the release version, you will install it on your disk and you launch it from, you know, from the icon on your desktop or wherever, right? That's how it works, okay? Cool. Now let's talk about the interface, because it's really important for you to understand what the hell is going on, right? Let's talk about this screen here because it's really important. It's called splash screen, and you're gonna see it only once. Now there are 2 or 3 settings that you wanna fiddle with. One of them is gonna be spacebar action, and spacebar is a really large button, and you don't really want it to, you know, have it set to play. You want to set it to search. Now, if you're going to leave it on play, what it will do if you press it, it's going to start playing this animation bar on the bottom, and it will display FPS counter here on the top. You're going to be very confused to what's happening. If you're not going to be doing animations, you will not see this bar ever again in your life. So you don't need that, okay? So you want to nuke this, and I'll show you how to do it in a minute. But before we do that, we're going to switch it to search, because search is going to be way more beneficial for you than playing animations. Because you can search for key maps, you can search for function operations, you know, etc. So this is really, really useful. Next, you may want to change your theme, but I would not advise it. because honestly, light theme is gonna be very hard on your eyes. I would stick with black theme, so dark theme, keep it on dark, and you're gonna be good to go. And once you're done, you just simply click here and it's gonna disappear, okay? Now, before we talk about this scene here, let's change the resolution of the UI so you can actually see what's happening because it's really small. So I will go to Edit Preferences, and here on the interface, I will change this to 1.4 so you can actually see what I'm doing. I will click on this button and uncheck Autosave Preferences because I want to save them manually. I want to have a control over what I'm saving in here, right? Save, and we're good to go. So now let's talk about this screen here. What we're seeing? We're seeing camera. You see this here in the scene collection, cube, right? And the light. Now, if you're going to be modeling, you don't really need these two. And also, I don't know what I want to start with when I'm modeling. Maybe it's going to be a sphere. So honestly, I don't need a cube. I want a clean scene when I start. So what you could do is select them with your mouse and hold Shift. Or what you could do is press A to select all of them. Press X and delete them. Now our scene is clean, okay? Cool. Next, this bar I told you, the animation bar, you can make it larger or smaller by dragging it. You can also collapse it because we don't need it, okay? So hover your mouse over here in the corner, click and drag, and you can collapse it. Cool, so now we have a clean scene. Our collection is clean, we have nothing in the scene. So what we can do now is we can adjust the canvas and rotate our scene. So I'll show you the basic navigation in Blender. If you hold middle mouse button, you can rotate your canvas, right? If you hold Shift and middle mouse button, you can pan it. And if you scroll in and out your middle mouse button, you can zoom it in and out. You can also hold Control, hold middle mouse button and move your mouse up and down to zoom in and out. And that's basic operation in Blender. Now, if I'm going to close the Blender right now and open it again, I will have the cube, the camera, the light, and the bar here present again. It's going to open with the same settings. Why? Because I did not save the default settings for Blender. So what we want to do, we want to go here and we want to save startup file. Now, if I do this, a few things going to happen. One, my Blender, if I close it, right, it's going to open with my scene set the way we set it. No cube, no light, no camera, no bar. And you probably noticed that my Blender opened precisely in a window that I'm recording. So Blender will remember not just the size of the window, but also the placement of the window on your screen. So if you're using a larger screen like I do, 21 by 9, it's going to open in a very specific location on your screen. This is really cool when you want to arrange your screen. For example, you want to work on one part of a screen, on the other you want to open references. Your Blender is going to open always at the same location, which is really useful. Now, I told you that we're going to be seeing this screen only once, and it could look like the same screen, but it's actually a different screen. This is actually a splash screen inside of Blender, and you're gonna see that thing every time you open Blender. Now, for me, I don't really need it, but if you want to have it displayed, you can just leave it alone. You can access all kinds of stuff in here, including manual, tutorials, etc., support, whatever. But you know, honestly, I don't need it, so I don't want it to pop when I open Blender. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go here to Preferences. I'm gonna go to Interface and uncheck this and save preferences, and I'm good to go. Okay, so there you go. Now if I'm going to, you know, save this as defaults, when I'm going to open my Blender, it's going to be clean and ready to go. Okay, now there are specific ways of setting up user interface, and I have a, you know, separate video on this, so watch that if you want. I'll show you how to set up the user interface, how to set up the colors, the themes, everything. I'm not going to be focusing here on this in this video because I already recorded it, so go ahead and watch it. In fact, we also covered this in detail in our course. I mentioned HAL Service Accelerator. So again, if you're interested, grab it. The link is in the video description and in the comment pinned underneath the video. In just 2 weeks, if you start the lesson an hour a day, you can literally master the basics of hard surface modeling, including all the menus, all the tools. It's a very well structured curriculum that again goes way beyond the scope of this video, okay? But what I want to talk to you about now is kind of basic operations and how it all works, right? Now, if I wanted to start modeling here, what I can do is go to add and mesh and a cube, and I'm gonna, add a cube to my scene, and you can see I'm gonna have a cube in a collection. Now, there's a quicker way of doing this, and this is something that you should be learning constantly when you work in Blender. You should start learning shortcuts because Blender is shortcut driven. There are not many shortcuts, and they're kind of easy to learn because you will learn them by repetition, every day doing the same thing over and over. And it's really not that difficult, but they're very useful. So watch this. If I delete the cube, right, and I press Shift A, I'll have exactly the same menu as I have in here, but the difference is it's gonna pop when my cursor is. So it's really convenient. So Shift A, mesh, add a cube, right? And it's super convenient because I don't have to go all the way up here and, add a cube. So now you see the cube in a viewport, and if you wanted to move it, rotate it, or scale it, it's really easy. You can move it by pressing G, so G, and then you see that you're gonna be moving into, kind of freely in a window. If you wanna constrain it to one of these axes, so Y, X, or Z, now Z is invisible, but you can enable it in here under viewport overlays. Now you can see Z axis, so G, Z, or Y, or X. So if you want to constrain it to an axis, press G and Y, for example, right? If you want to scale it, press S, right? And you can scale it on each of these axes as well, right? And if you want to rotate it, you can rotate it on each of these axes as well, right? Now, if you wanted to scale your cube, for example, on 2 axes and exclude one of them, you can hold Shift. So you go G, right? And then Shift Z, which is going to allow you to move it on Y and X, but not on Z. Or press S, Shift Z, and this is going to allow you to scale it on Y and X, but not on Z. So there you go. That's the basics of, transforming your objects here. So you have rotation, R, G moving, and then you also have scaling. Now, if you want to go into edit mode and start working on vertices, edges, and faces, you want to switch between object mode, in which we are now, to edit mode. And you can do it by pressing Tab. You see now we are in edit mode, now in object mode, and you can see some other options here on the T-bar. That's called T-bar or T-panel. And you also have N panel here, pressing N, which is going to show you some information about your item. So if you go to object view, you can see our cube is 2 by 2 by 2 meters. Our scale is here, which at the moment is uniform because it's 1 by 1 by 1. And you can see rotation here, right? Location and the scale, okay? See, the numbers are updated when I'm performing these operations. So that's very important and useful information, okay? So again, N and T. Cool. So let's go to edit mode. And now if you want to access verts, edges, or faces, you can press 1, 2, 3. So 1 for verts, right? Then 2 for edges, right? And 3 for faces, okay? So now what I can do, for example, I can press GX and move this face in here and press Tab to go back to object mode, and my cube was scaled on this side, so towards this this axis here. We just pull this face, right? If you want to edit the edge, for example, you go to edit mode, press 2, select an edge, press Ctrl B for a bevel, and you can, for example, chamfer it or scroll your mouse up and down to add segments to change it into a bevel, right? Tab and back to object mode. And there you go. Now, I press Ctrl B and you may think, well, hang on a second, how do I learn all these shortcuts? Well, remember I told you to change spacebar to search menu. Now watch this. If I go to edit mode, right? And I want to bevel my edge and I forget the shortcut, all I need to do is go to spacebar, search menu, type bevel, and there it is. Bevel edges, Ctrl B. Bevel vertices, Shift Ctrl B. So for example, if I'm going to add a plane, so Shift A, add a plane, G, Y to move it here, Tab, edit mode, 1, vertices, select a vert, right? Shift, Control B, and you can bevel a vertex. So it's really useful to have this search bar here because you can search all kinds of stuff that you're confused about, okay? Cool, awesome. Now let's talk about modifiers, because Blender is actually working based off of modifiers, and modifiers is something that allows you to change the state of your mesh without actually damaging it. So it's a kind of like a procedural or sort of a, non-destructive way of working, right? So for example, right, let's say I wanted to add a bevel to all these edges, all of them at the same time, right? Instead of selecting all these edges in edit mode, right? So go into 2 and select all the edges and pressing Control B, I could do this. The only problem is that now all my edges are kind of baked into a model, and they're present on the model, and if I want to change anything right now, I'm stuck with these edges. Not the best situation to have, and not the best way to model, okay? What you want to do instead, you want to add a bevel modifier. So you go here to this wrench, right? You go to modifiers, and you go to generate, and you go to bevel. And this is a good moment for me to tell you, kind of remind you about different versions of Blender. Remember, like I told you, that you shouldn't be hung up too much on versions of Blender because the changes between versions are minimal. I'll watch this. If I click here on the modifiers, I will see this menu, right? So it's edit, generate, deform, normals, physics. You got different modifiers, right? But if I go to Blender 3.6, okay, and if I'm gonna add a cube, and look at this, the interface is literally the same, right? See what I mean? So if I'm gonna, if I'm gonna add a cube here, right, and go to edit mode, right? And don't worry about this, I'm using add-ons, so don't worry about it. I'm using machine tool add-ons. And again, colors are different because I simply adjusted them here under preferences. And just watch my video on UI setup. You're gonna learn how to do this. You can do it here under themes, 3D viewport here, you can change stuff, okay? But anyway, if you go to the wrench in modifiers, see it's a very different window, but the same modifiers. You got the same modifiers, they're simply differently categorized. Because instead of having menus, you got simply one window, and that's one of the 3 differences between Blender 2.8 or 3.6 and 4.5. So again, don't really worry about Blender version because it's really not a big deal, okay? It's not a problem at all. So let's go back to our bevel and let me show you what you need to do in order for this to work. Because at the moment we have a chamfer, what we want is a bevel, right? So what we want to do, we want to increase the number of segments to 3, okay? Then we can hold shift to slow the movement of this amount slider, because if I use it like that, it's really quick. If you hold shift, you're going to slow down the movement, and you can fine tune it to something smaller like this, right? And we have a bevel. And now you may ask, well, hang on a second, this bevel looks a bit, kind of rough and kind of faceted. And that's because we are working in a flat mode. So if you right click on the mesh, right? And see here, we have a model shaded flat. Flat shading is going to shade all the faces on the model flat, and this is why we're seeing this kind of a faceting. If you want to make it more smooth, you can either go shade smooth or shade auto smooth. And this is what I would advise you to use, because auto smooth is going to add a modifier that's going to tell Blender which edges are supposed to be sharp, okay? Sharp, as in sharp corner. That's really important, okay? That's essential for hard surface modeling, and it's also important for shading. Now we get another problem with shading here. You can see that it's a little bit bulging, and that's because now auto smooth and bevel will try to smooth out all these faces in between the bevels, and they're gonna be bulging out, okay? It's something to do with normals. Don't worry about it right now, but it's a bit more technical. But what you need to know is that you need to simply add one more modifier to fix this. And it's called weighted normal modifier, which is going to flex all the flat faces for your model. So go here to normals, weighted normal modifier, and you just go here and click this option, keep sharp. Okay, it's important. And once you do that, what you want to do is you want to unpin this smooth by angle, and you want to drag this modifier down here underneath. It's really essential to follow a very specific order of modifiers. See, we're getting a bit more into more complicated areas here, but If you're going to be working with modifiers in Blender, and you have to work with modifiers because that's how Blender works, then you're going to have to respect the order of modifiers. There is a specific order of modifiers that you need to follow, otherwise you're going to have shading problems, disappearing booleans, mirrors not working, all that stuff, right? So it's really important to understand the order of modifiers. And that's why we're working, for example, with add-ons like Hardops and Box Cutter, because they're gonna sort these modifiers for us automatically with one click. But you know, start with the basics and then go to more advanced stuff. So this is why I suggest you get our course, the Hard Surface Accelerator, because this course will teach you all these things about modifiers and everything in great detail, and you will really understand how it all works. And it's really not that complicated, but it takes time to practice and get used to it, okay? Now, another modifier that you may want to use, which is really common other than bevel, is a Boolean modifier. And this is going to show you how important the order of modifier really is. Now, vanilla Blender Booleans are annoying as hell. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go here and install an extension, which is kind of like an add-on, but it's an add-on that comes with Blender. It's a native Blender add-on. You have add-ons that come from other creators like here, right? Or extensions that come with Blender. Now, in order to access extensions, you need to allow online access. And once you do that, you'll see an updated list of these add-ons. And what we're going to install is something called Bool tool. This is going to allow us to run Boolean operations, which are cuts that you're going to be running on your mesh. And once you install this, confusingly enough, it's going to be displayed here under add-ons. Don't ask me why, it's confusing. Now, see, going back again to differences between versions, between this Blender and previous Blender versions, that's one of the changes that they introduced. Now, before we close this, make sure you save preferences, otherwise Blender will not remember that you added this add-on or extension, and next time you open Blender, it will disappear. So if you add an add-on or an extension to Blender, always remember to save preferences. Really important, okay? Now, going back to what I said about add-ons, let me go back to 3.6, right? And if you go here to edit preferences, right, you will not see extensions, you're gonna see only add-ons. And stuff like, for example, Bool tool, right, is under add-ons. Just like other extensions like Loop tools, for example, that's another extension from Blender and it's under add-ons. There is no extension window. Everything was under add-ons. There were no extension and you did not have to go online in order to install them. They came with Blender, right? So that's the difference, you see. So the differences, again, are very microscopic and minute and really not important. And once you understand what's happening, you know, one simple video will sort it out for you. And again, in our course, the Hard Surface Accelerator, we have a specific video that teaches you and shows you all the changes that happen between the Blender versions. So you're gonna be, oh, okay, that's what happened. Now you know what's going on, right? Easy. Okay, so now let's add a Boolean. So let's add something we can use as a Boolean, as a cutter. So another cube, right? And you see, you might be confused. Okay, why am I seeing this kind of like a nasty, you know, kind of a shading? What's happening here is it's called z-fighting. And that means that you have two objects of the same size occupying the same area in 3D space, which is why Blender doesn't really know which one is on top or which one is on the bottom, and you can get this z-fighting. So they fight for attention. What you want to do is you want to move it, so GY, and move it somewhere here, and you're good to go. Every single new object is going to be added on this cursor, and you can move this cursor if you want to other locations, like for example, hold Shift and right click, you can move it in here. And if I'm going to add a cube right now, it's going to get added in here, okay? You can reset it to origin by pressing Shift S, it's called Pie menu, and you can move the cursor back to origin, okay? So cursor to world origin, boom, and it's back in the cross between X, Y, and Z axes, okay? That's the world's origin. So by default, all the objects going to be created here in the middle on the cursor, okay? Cool, so let's grab this cube and scale it, right? And we're going to move it. So GY, move it in here, and GZ, and move it in here. And now what we want to Boolean this object with this object. So we want to select the cutter, which is this one, Shift, select what we're cutting, and you want to press Ctrl- on a numpad. Now, if you don't have numpad, which you can do, you can go to Preferences, and go to Input, which is here, and emulate numpad, okay? Again, watch the video I told you about on setting all these preferences here and setting the UI, because I show all these things over there. Okay, there's quite a few things you need to set in here. So, watch the video. Now watch this, okay? First of all, watch what happened to the shading. It's all messed up, right? You got this pull, my bevel disappeared, bevel is running here, and there's some shading problem. Now no bevel on this cut. It's like, what's going on? Well, if you look at the order of modifiers here, right? We have bevel, then we have smooth by angle, then weighted normal, then Boolean. So what's happening is this. Blender is beveling everything. Then we tell him Blender which edges should be sharp and at which angle, which is 30 degrees. Then we are flexing all the flat faces, and then we cutting. So this is a last operation that, goes through. So what we need to do, we need to simply move this Boolean up above these operations here. So now we fix the shading, you see, but we still have a problem with the bevel. Why? Because we're running bevel on the entire cube, and then we're cutting a chunk of this cube out of it. So what we need to do, we need to move the Boolean before the bevel. So it's first going to be cutting the cube, and then it's going to be running the bevel on all the shapes after the cut was performed. So even if it's procedural, because I can still grab this cube and move it, right, which is why it's called non-destructive modeling, you still need to tell Blender the order in which you want to perform the operations, right? So if I'm going to move it above here, boom, our bevel is back. Now we got another problem here. You can see clearly that something is nasty happening in the corner. What's that? Well, that's a vanilla Blender setting for bevel, which is unfortunately hasn't been changed in ages, and they should have done it ages ago, but still they didn't. What you need to do is go here to your bevel, to geometry, and under miter outer you need to switch it from sharp to arc, and this is going to fix all the issues with your booleans and your shading. So there you go, that's how it works, and this is still a live boolean, and you can move it around, and do all kinds of things with it, which is really cool. So that's how basic, modifiers work. Another basic modifier that you might be using is going to be a mirror. So if you're going to add a mirror to this equation, by the way, you can collapse these modifiers here using these arrows if you don't want to, see them opened up. You can also apply them. But if you apply a modifier, so if you, for example, go here and apply this modifier, my cube is going to have this cut applied to it, because at the moment, you can see there is a cut in object view, right? You can see a cut clearly, but it's an illusion. If I go to edit mode here, you see I'm still seeing this edge. Why? Because in edit mode, these changes haven't been actually yet applied. If I'm going to apply this boolean, right, in object mode, then if I go to edit mode, you see now I can see that the cut was performed. So that's a difference between, having a live modifier and applying it, okay? So if I press Ctrl Z, I can go back in time, so revert, undo the operations and go back to the state when my boolean was live. So if I click on the cube, go to edit mode, I can still work on the basic cube topology, like for example, Ctrl B, and add a chamfer here, okay? So that's how it works. So even though you can see this cut here, it's not actually applied to the mesh yet. So now let's add a mirror to it, right? To make it a bit more complex. So you want to go here, and you want to go to generate, and you want to go to mirror. And by default, nothing is happening. Why? Because by default, mirror works on the x-axis. You can see here, right? On the x-axis. We are working on the y-axis, right? Not the x-axis. So what we want to do is we want to mirror this cube on the y-axis, right? So turn this off and select y-axis, and you want to bisect it, right? And you see we get a shading problem. Why? Because again, we need to move this mirror above smooth by angle and weighted normals, but underneath the bevel and boolean. And now you are mirroring this cutter across to the other side. And that's how it works, okay? And lastly, I'll show you one more modifier, which is really useful for hard surface modeling, which is called solidification. This is going to allow you to make stuff like planes thicker, so create panels, for example, right? So for instance, if I wanted to add solidification to it, I'm going to go here and go to generate, and I'm going to go to solidification, okay? And you see now we can solidify this plane by using this slider up and down, okay? And this is going to allow you to, you know, kind of thicken out this plane. And this is all procedural. So if I go to edit mode, you're going to see only plane. You see this top part is just an illusion again. You know, we have only one face in the bottom here, right? So if I go to edit mode again, all I'm seeing here is this face in the bottom, and this top part is an illusion. If I apply this, right? So go to object mode. You always have to apply modifiers in object mode. If I apply this, I'm gonna be able to see the whole geometry now. You see that? That's how it works, okay? So Control Z again, going back. And now on top of this, I can also stack a bevel. So generate bevel, and it's going to bevel my mesh. Same operation, right? So make it smaller, add some segments, right click, shade auto smooth, go here, normals, weighted normal, right? Unpin this and move it above, and you're good to go, right? And that's how it works, okay? So these would be the basics of modeling. If you combine these techniques, you know, with edit mode work and object mode work with Booleans and modifiers, then you can create some really cool stuff. And lastly, you really want to keep your work saved. So you want to go here and save as and save on a PC. I would highly recommend you grab an add-on called PowerSave. It's a free add-on, and it's going to allow you to basically keep the progress intact. So if your Blender crashes or anything happens, you will lose maximum, you know, 2 minutes or 1 minute of your work, so 60 seconds, which is fantastic. It's really advisable when you work with add-ons to run this add-on. It's super app. It's from Buongiorno7. Is a member of Team C, team that delivered us Hardops and Boxcutter. It's a really robust add-on. So I'll show you how to install external add-ons, because I showed you how to install the extensions, but this is an external add-on, so I'll show you. I'll go to my folder here. You see I'm in a folder that's called add-ons right here, 4.5 package. Remember I told you I have add-ons for a specific Blender version. You can see PowerSave here. I'll drag and drop it to my Blender window, click OK, and it's installed. And you can see it here on the top. It was installed. You can access PowerSave. Some of the add-ons gonna appear on the top bar, like for example Hardops, but all of them or most of them is gonna appear here on the end bar as well. So you can change settings in here or in here. And what I would recommend doing is clicking autosave, switching interval to 1 minute, and instead of overwrite, running additional file with a suffix. So now if I'm gonna press PowerSave, it's going to save my file, and every 60 seconds it's gonna be saving that file. So if my Blender crashes, I can very easily recover my file and keep working without losing all the work that normally you would lose by manually saving every 10 minutes. I mean, 10 minutes of work, if you're working really fast, it's quite a lot. So this could be very annoying, okay? The last thing I'm gonna show is collections. So we're gonna look here into this menu. So if you want to, for example, split these two into collections, so you want to rename this, very easy. You can double click here and change any name of whatever you want to keep it, you know, organized. You can turn off visibility in viewport. This one is visibility in render. You also have other options here. For example, you could enable this, which will disable or enable the ability of selecting something. So let's say I want to, you know, turn off the selectability of this cube. Now I cannot select the cube at all. So if I press A, I can select everything except the cube. So it's a cool tool when you have a lot of stuff in the scene and you want to just, you know, exclude some stuff from, like, for example, you have a plane for a background and you don't want to move it by accident. You can turn it off. Very useful, okay? But if you want to create new collection, very easy, press M, new collection, and you type, for example, I don't know, planes, whatever, right? And we're going to be moving this plane to this planes collection. So I can turn it on and off and organize my scene this way. You can move them as well if you want to, up and down by drag and dropping, easy. It's a fantastic tool, very powerful, okay? So this would be the very basics on Blender. Again, watch my video on the UI. And if you want to learn as quickly as possible and you want to save as much time as possible on studying Blender, then I would really recommend our course, the Hard Surface Accelerator, which, like I said, is superb. We have close to 5,000 students in the course. You can read all the testimonials from students on our website. You can also go on our Discord, which has 8,000 people, and ask around, and they'll tell you what they think about it and their opinion. We know that this course is amazing. It was developed throughout the years based on feedback from over 100,000 students that we taught. So it's a very well structured and very tight curriculum that was created specifically to introduce you as quickly and as easily as possible to Blender and teach you only things that you need to know to get you started. So anyway, Hard Surface Accelerator, the link is in the video description and in the pinned comment under the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.